What does substance abuse look like? It looks like a student, a teacher, a homeless person, a nurse, a friend, a physician, a researcher, a lawyer, a sibling. Addiction takes on many forms, and most of us know it is a big problem. Our team, Marion Urban Research Group, set out to answer the question, how prevalent is substance use on Indiana Wesleyan University's campus? IWU is a small private Christian university located in Marion, Indiana. Because of their affiliation with the Wesleyan Church, IWU is what's called a dry campus, meaning the use of alcohol and drugs on campus are prohibited. Despite this expectation, substance use still occurs on campus, oftentimes unreported. To see how substance use is thought about and experienced on Indiana Wesleyan's campus, our team started by interviewing several IWU students.
So my initial thoughts when somebody mentions somebody that has substance use disorder, I see somebody going through it, is kind of just sadness for them.
Honestly, the first thing I think of is oh my goodness, poor them. A lot of people that I hear talk about things, they're it's kind of their own fault, but really I don't think that's true at all.
I feel a great empathy towards them. It's a hard thing to struggle with, and there's so much stigma around it that the ways to get help aren't always present in people's lives. Just because there's so much more shame around drugs and this assumption that people who use drugs are dangerous outright, that it makes it hard to reach out and ask for help.
My initial thoughts is how can I help this person right now in this moment? Instead of just being oh my gosh, they're an addict. They're doing this to themselves. Oh, they don't deserve any help. And I'm always just okay, what are some resources? Where can I help them? Where can I take them? Or what can I give them that's going to help them in this situation?
Addiction, when I think of the word, I tend to define it as something having power or control over your actions or emotions, something that would make you do something that you wouldn't do otherwise.
I think, to me, the word addiction can cover a lot of different things. I know a lot of college students talk about being addicted to caffeine or things like that maybe aren't as concerning. And then you could also be addicted to prescription drugs or alcohol or something that might have more of a long-lasting impact on your health. So I guess in my mind, addiction is basically when you're so dependent on a substance or something that you have clear withdrawal symptoms when you go without it.
Addiction looks like a normal person or somebody that is homeless living on the street. Addiction to me is just, it can be a hidden thing. There's so many people in our lives that probably struggle with an addiction, whether it's gambling or alcohol or hard drugs, and they may be really good at hiding it, and some people aren't good at hiding it.
I've known people struggling with addiction, and on the outside, they look like everything's fine. It's only because I'm close to them, that I've ever been able to know these things because they've told me.
It's really tough to say how prevalent addiction is on IWU campus because I feel a lot of people would be afraid to talk about their substance abuse because I feel just the culture we've created here is so very concerned with following all the rules to the letter of the law. I'm not sure that they would be willing or able to speak out about that if they did have a substance abuse problem, but if I had to guess, I'd probably say it's at least more common than we think it is.
I'm not completely sure how prevalent substance abuse is on IWU's campus, but my guess is that it's not as prevalent as on maybe state schools campuses?
I wouldn't say that it's extremely prevalent on campus, but I do think that it does happen, and a lot of times it does go unreported, so we don't know exactly how big of an issue it is.
I'd say more prevalent than any of the staff would like to believe.
I'm not blind to the fact that it does happen on campus.
I do not know firsthand of any resources that help those struggling with addiction, but I have heard people talking about resources that are available in Grant County, and I do know people that I could go to if they wanted more information and if they wanted more resources.
I don't know any resources in Grant County that help with addiction. You would think as a college student away from home for the first time that it is one of those things that should be treated as a cautionary measure, that during NSO week when they're giving out all the resources, they should give out organizations that can help with these things, or like emergency numbers to call.
Specifically here on campus, you can go to campus police and they will help.
I've heard about people drinking or using illegal substances on campus, but I haven't heard much about it becoming like a real problem in people's lives. I think the closest story that I've heard about of it becoming a problem was I heard about someone who was partying and drinking a lot in the past and then decided that wasn't the life for her and tried to change.
I don't know that I've heard much directly about substance abuse during my time at IWU. I know they talk about it a bit during events like Stand Up in Chapel and whatnot, but I don't know that I've heard many, personal anecdotes about people who used to use substances or still use substances, except for the occasional, snarky suggestion from someone that they might use alcohol on a weekend. But sadly, I think that's just kind of part of the college culture that our country has kind of created. But yeah, I don't really know that I've heard much about substance abuse directly while I've been on IWU campus.
I have heard of students being drunk in the student center. I have heard of students having beer in their rooms. I have heard of students off campus being the ones that people go to drink with. I have heard of people agreeing with their suite mates to have a six-pack in their dorm. I've heard of people carrying White Claws in their book bags. I know that there's almost certainly people who go off campus and drink in environments that are a ways enough from IWU that they don't think anyone's going to see it.
One student in particular even sent us their story of personal experience with substance use while attending IWU. To keep the person's identity anonymous, we asked several students to read it for us.
I think drinking has become a way many students are able to maintain a sense of agency and autonomy as students at IWU. My freshman year, my roommate and I hosted multiple parties in our room.
Everyone, mainly upperclassmen ministry majors, brought their drinks with them and would leave some for us as well. We had a strict rule against getting drunk, and the few times that someone did drink too much, they were asked to leave. We kept a trash bag under the bottom bunk of our bed to stash used bottles in. When it got full, my roommate would carry it out straight through the lobby, bottles clinking against each other as he walked. One time he even stopped in the lobby and talked to our RA. Our RA gave no hint of having any idea what we were up to, but his roommate and both his suite mates came to our little parties.
When we just had a bottle or two that we wanted to get rid of, we would take them to a trash can somewhere on campus. We would throw bottles away in a different trash can each time. I threw 2 wine bottles away in the packed office once. On my way into Rebash, I tossed my roommate's empty Jack bottle into a student center trash can.
That year, I went to only a couple off-campus parties. Once I drank a bit more than I should and ended up puking in a bush behind Beckett.
I spent the night in my friend's car in the Carmen parking lot. I grew up in a Wesleyan church and my parents didn't drink. They taught us drinking was bad. I didn't really know what my limits were or how to consume alcohol in a healthy way. I learned everything I knew about drinking from my peers.
At IWU, if someone is caught drinking, even if they are over 21, are drinking in a protected off-campus environment and are doing it responsibly, they still have to do this essay and everything about how bad drinking is.
It worries me because I feel it perpetuates the idea that alcohol itself is bad. It doesn't encourage people to understand healthy ways to consume.
My sophomore year, we started a tradition of buying a baguette or Italian bread from Meyer and eating it with some wine while we talked about our week. Eventually, though, we stopped doing that regularly because my suite mate and roommate started getting high together each night.
I was in leadership at the time and didn't want to be part of that because it isn't legal yet in Indiana, so I didn't do that with them.
Then I ended abstaining even from alcohol for a couple semesters because I took on a supervisory role in my campus job and wanted to be more careful.
But I think it was really during this last year and all the stuff that happened with Zeb, among other things, that made me feel like, I don't owe this to IWU. I'm 21, and all my friends are getting together, socializing, and doing some much-needed de-stressing in our community with each other. Over Christmas break last year, my suite mates and I went to a dispensary, bought dab pens and edibles, got high, and watched Bob's Burgers together.
That next semester, we had weed in our room all the time. I felt more comfortable with it by then and would get high with them.
We would sit around and talk about theology or social issues or drama that was happening in our divisions. It was a nice way to unwind and recover from the stress of student life and work. That's when I started making my own wine, too.
I'd always wanted to try winemaking, and I guess I just thought, what better place to take this new hobby for a spin than my dorm room? I already knew of people who had a makeshift still in their room.
One time I poured some in a styrofoam cup from Wildcat and took it with me to a meeting at Macon, and then to an honors class.
When I started drinking again, I went to a few off-campus parties, which commuters who lived within a couple blocks from campus would host. At this point, though, I knew my limits better and didn't drink in a way that was unhealthy or abusive. Some of the parties I went to had a pretty good-sized crowd.
Students from every department and in all types of student leadership were at these parties. The atmosphere was different than on campus. It just felt like everyone was less judgmental. Part of that was definitely the alcohol and cannabis, but part of it was just being away from the pressure to conform to IWU standards.
This person may have avoided trouble, but the fact remains that many students like this one learn all that they know about substance use from their peers. This is not healthy, and at many points, this student could have been in real danger. To learn more about the dangers of substance use, we interviewed Chief of Campus Police, Kyle Beal. Officer Beal has been faithfully serving the Grant County and IWU community for several years. Officer Beal has a heart for serving IWU students and has compassion for those burdened with addiction.
How big would you say drug use is on IWU's campus?
That's a tough question because I have to go by what is reported. Reported wise, we've actually went down from the previous years because I have to do the Cleary report. So it's report-wise it's down, but again, I'm not naive. I know things happen on campus, whether it happens off campus, at off-campus housing, or just it's not getting reported or people aren't getting caught doing it.
Yeah, makes sense. To your understanding, what are the more commonly used drugs on campus?
Yeah. Again, we have to go by what's reported to us, and the majority of drug use is either alcohol or marijuana.
What is your biggest concern about drug use at IWU and for students?
Yeah, I think it's obviously we don't want anyone to get hurt And we don't know what the students are getting. If they go off of campus, what are they getting into? I mean, you know, anything can be laced with anything. So if you go off and get, hey, I'm gonna go get this drug, is it laced with something? Which could ultimately hurt them or kill them.
That's a great point. I think that a lot of students hear things like that, like, oh, you don't know what something could be laced with, and they think, oh, that's not a real issue, that's not, nobody would put, this person that I'm getting my drugs from isn't going to lace what I'm getting, that can't happen to me. What, do you feel like it's a realistic concern?
Oh, it's definitely a realistic concern, because I mean, if you're going to somebody to buy drugs, that's an illegal activity. They're not the most honest people if they're trying to make a living selling drugs. So to say, no, my stuff's not laced, they don't know, because they get it from somebody else who gets it from, I mean, you just don't know who's handled that, that drug, and you don't know what's ultimately in it.
What would you tell the student body about drug use, addiction, the risks?
Just know that if you have an issue, there are resources on campus. There are people that are wanting the best from you and give you the help that you need. Don't be afraid to reach out to myself or an officer and say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. This is, I mean, it's going to be difficult to go up to a police officer and say, hey, I'm an addict. What can I do? I know that's not reality. If we can't get them the help, we can give them the resources to somebody that can get them the help.
Can you talk a little bit about what the Narcan resource on campus would look like?
As far as what we have currently, we don't have anything currently. I'm open to the possibility of getting something started. I just don't know how that would look. I know the core program has ways to help with that. So yeah, we would be more than happy to partner with them to get something on our campus.
How do you feel like having Narcan available on campus would be beneficial?
I mean, ultimately, it's kind of one of those, it's a catch-22. You have it on, okay, you can't use drugs, but yet you've got a way to help if somebody is in that state of under the influence. So it's one of those things that's, again, we're not naive, things happen, but so if it saves a person, it's ultimately worth it.
Being on a Christian campus,
Yeah.
do you think that there's an added stigma about substance use? And do you think that the self-reporting protection does enough to help break that stigma?
It's just like anything. It's never easy to tell the truth when it comes to what you're doing wrong. Especially to myself or another police officer. Coming up to a police officer and saying, hey, these are the rules I broke. What can we do to help it? You know, so it's
not natural.
It's not natural. It's very difficult. But if it's, I want people to be able to feel free that they can come to me, knowing, yeah, I have a job to do, but I also want to make sure they're safe.
If a student wants to reach out to you or campus police, what's the best way that they can get hold of you?
Of course, campus police, we're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You can call 765-677-4911. The office hours are Monday through Thursday, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then on Friday, it's 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then Sunday, 5 to 9. So they stop in and say, hey, I need to talk to Kyle. The students can contact me that way. My office is upstairs in the Student Center, Suite 282. Go up there and say, hey, I need to talk to Kyle.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
No problem.
One thing made clear from this interview is that despite campus police's willingness to help, not all instances of substance use make it into their office. Much of the substance use on campus goes unreported, making it impossible to know the prevalence of this issue at our school. In talking to the Student Development Office, we were alerted to the dangers of lacing. It has become a common practice for dealers to lace drugs with fentanyl and other dangerous substances. This has even touched IWU's student body in recent semesters, which calls for the acknowledgement that it can happen to anyone and everywhere. Over the course of Urban Research Group's partnership with CORE, we have learned a lot about the resources available in Grant County to help fight substance abuse, both on and off campus. In order to understand more about their mission and how those struggling can connect with them, we sat down with several members of CORE's team.
All right, so we're just going to go down the line first and introduce yourselves, what you do for the program, and yeah, so we'll start with you.
My name is Kelly Hostetler, and I work with the CORE program. Actually, Pam and I helped write the grant that started the whole program, and so we're kind of coordinators, I would say, probably of the grant.
My name is Paula Easterday, and I'm peer support specialist, and I answer CORE calls when they come in, and I go to the hospital if there's an emergency, an overdose. Also, I am on call, like different nights of the week, so then I get calls till 11 o'clock and I go to the hospital and take care of the emergency. So.
My name is Pam Leslie, and I help Kelly write the grant, and probably the burden that we carry the most at this point is just communicating to the grantor about how we're spending the money, and then in rolling out additional funding for future support of the program.
Well, CORE stands for the acronym Community Opioid Response Endeavor. But it's really not just about opioids, it's about all substances that we're worried about being misused in Grant County. So, but the acronym didn't fit, so we went with CORE.
What is your favorite thing about working with the CORE program and being a part of it?
The CORE program is a program to provide peer support specialists and community health workers into our hospital, Marion Health, for people who are impacted by substance use disorder. So that can be someone who is using substances, it can be a family member of someone who is using substances, it can be an organization that's impacted, like an employer or a community service or a school. It's not Marion Health alone, it's like 13 organizations in our county who have come to the table.
I just want to help everybody who's affected by addiction, whether it's opioids or whatever other addiction, to be more independent and less dependent on substances.
I think for me, one of the surprising things, I came into the program probably feeling like I had a little bit of handle on it, and I didn't. I had more stigma than I thought I did, to be really honest, and being involved in this and meeting people like Paula that are in recovery, and it makes me realize how important it is to always give people another chance. One time doesn't always work, but it's a step in the right direction. Yeah. And sometimes the one time does work.
You guys talk a little bit about Narcan, what it does, what you guys offer in order to educate people on it, and just like where the boxes are located in Marion.
Well, the box, we have two boxes. One is at Grant County Rescue Mission on the side of the building by the front door. It's open to the public, and we always have instructions and a CORE card, business card, and then Narcan, and then we have one at the Renewed store that the mission runs in Gas City. And we fill them Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so there's always plenty. It's a very important thing, and I get a lot of CORE calls. They'll be like, my son's out, and I know he's doing crazy things, and can you just tell me where the Narcan box is in case I have to, bring him back. So I'm constantly saying, okay, you can go here, and there's instructions. So, but we also offer Narcan classes, Narcan training.
Narcan reverses an overdose from an opioid. Okay, so if someone has taken too much heroin, too much fentanyl, too much morphine, you can put that little nasal Narcan up their nose, and hopefully one dose does it. Sometimes it doesn't, it takes more than one. It does not If we don't have an opioid on board in our bodies and someone sticks a Narcan up my nose and squirts it, it's not going to do anything to me. I will feel no impact, no effect. It's not contraindicated. It's not going to cause my heart to act up or my kidneys to act up or anything like that. It will not hurt me. So that's the huge beauty of Narcan. It only impacts opioids. Now, if someone's overdosing on another substance, it won't impact them. So it's not like it's going to rescue everyone from an overdose, but if it's an opioid.
And opioids tend to cause the most immediate crisis. The others can be a little bit longer coming as far as an overdose from meth or from even cocaine. It can come, and it is also the highest cause of death is opioid overdoses. And so we do partnered with Overdose Lifeline. It's in the central part of Indiana, and they provide all of our Narcan free. So, and the boxes are free, and so we are excited that we can offer that. Another myth about Narcan that we hear is that people can get high on it, and that people go and get the free Narcan and have parties, right? Mm-hmm. So that makes people, I don't want one of those in my building. You know, I don't want to have that in my office, and there's no truth to that whatsoever. That's just a rumor, and it is not at all substantiated. And like Pam said, it has no effect on your body if you're not high on opioids. So how in the world could you have a party? You know, unless you're just being stupid, I guess. But many of our peers have actually been brought back by Narcan, and they can tell that story. And, you know, that's why they're here today.
What brought on this need to develop the core program?
So in 2013 was probably the early cusp of the United States realizing the opioid issues going all around, and much of that was stimulated by pain medications. So our GENE team, which is our undercover narcotics group here, we were in 2012, Grant County formed a substance abuse task force. Actually, it was called heroin then, but the GENE team, the narcotic team, said to Marion General, your people are the greatest suppliers. You're our biggest drug dealer, whether it be ER or primary care or pain, you know, and it was kind of a shocking thing because that's not at all what our healthcare is about, you know, but not realizing, you know, our physicians don't really see the impact of when they write a script for, you know, hydrocodone or something. They don't know that if they write a script for 20, they're selling that on the streets or potentially could.
People, because of the not prescribing so much, have compensated and started getting fentanyl. And so they've been adding that to marijuana, to cocaine, to methamphetamines, to heroin. When I get called to the ER, it is never because, oh, I took too many Lortabs or I took too many Vicodin or whatever. It's always like something laced with fentanyl or something laced with heroin or, you know, but mostly something laced with fentanyl.
We had a situation not too long ago where the GENE team made a bust of it. There's often from Detroit to Indianapolis, there's like a steady stream of drugs going back and forth. And with us being near 69, you know, there's a lot of traffic, but they were able to intercept a large shipment that was coming from Indy to here. And it was a dealer in Indianapolis was giving free marijuana. And they normally were a heroin dealer, and so you're looking at a market that's like, oh, well, marijuana is legal in 20 states, it's no big deal, but it was laced with heroin. So you're immediately adding heroin into what people may consider a sort of more recreational drug, and immediately could be potentially addicted. So they're always trying to keep their market going. When you say they're very creative in keeping the market going.
And the problem with that is like you said, marijuana is considered more of a recreational drug, but for somebody who has never done opiates or heroin, because obviously you build up a tolerance, but for someone who thinks that they're only getting marijuana and they've never done opiates, could potentially overdose and die immediately because they have no idea what is actually going on when they lace it with heroin and stuff like that.
The other thing that I've really learned in this process is that drugs have no preference of who they impact. Several of our friends that are in recovery are former attorneys. We have physicians, nurses, pretty much across the board, down to a lower socioeconomic group of people. It doesn't see race, it doesn't see color, it doesn't see age. I'm surprised at some of the referrals that we get of people in their 60s and 70s, that are struggling. And so it's just been a lot of a learning process.
After we interviewed Core, our team got to sit down with another recovering addict who dedicated her life to helping others recover from addiction. We asked what she would tell the student body about addiction. She said, "No one who ever became addicted planned on it happening. No one ever thinks it will happen to them or that they are losing control. I would tell anyone using to think of the worst case scenario. Ask yourself, what is the worst thing it may cost you if you became addicted? And then ask yourself if it is worth it. If I had never taken my first sip of alcohol, my vulnerability towards addiction would have stayed dormant in me my entire life." It is of the utmost importance to understand that no one ever plans on becoming addicted, and they rarely realize when they are losing control or becoming dependent. For college students, substance abuse doesn't always look like partying and hard drugs. Sometimes it looks like getting drunk or high to de-stress and staying in your dorm room. For others, it may look like taking more of their prescription than they're supposed to. And while you may not be yet addicted, you may be forming the habits or activating a genetic vulnerability to addiction that may become uncontrollable later. It is important that students know that there are resources available to them if they are concerned about substance use in any capacity. Out of the group of IWU students surveyed by URG about addiction, the majority reported low confidence levels in their knowledge of the resources available to them. Campus Police and CORE are two resources that would love to serve those struggling. Addiction does not look like any one thing, and it does not affect only one type of person. One trend we notice in all of our research is that poor mental health plays a big role in a person's vulnerability to substance use. If you or someone you know is struggling with their mental health, you can reach out to the Center for Student Success or Timely Care. We pray that those struggling with the use of substances reach out to friends, family, or resources that can love and support them through their journey, and remind them that they are loved by God and their community.